A beginner's guide to carbon pricing. Carbon taxes, cap and trade, carbon pricing, and decarbonization. These all sound like scary, complicated concepts you need an economics degree to understand. And sure, we all know these things have to do with climate change, but how do they work exactly and what do they mean? We want to show you the basics of what a carbon price is, how it affects you, and how it can help the climate. In order to avoid the worst effects of climate change, we've globally agreed to keep our planet's atmosphere from further warming by reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. One way of doing this is to encourage individuals and businesses to decrease their carbon emissions. Carbon pricing has been proposed to achieve this goal. It is the idea that if we make carbon more expensive, people will use less of it. Currently, the true costs of carbon pollution, climate change, air pollution, biodiversity loss, and impacts on human health are not included in the prices of fuel or other products we buy. Carbon is associated with every stage of a product's life cycle, from requiring the raw materials, to production, to delivery, and even in recycling. By pricing carbon, our economic system can better account for the damage caused by using fossil fuels. This allows us to cut our emissions globally and prevent catastrophic warming of our planet's atmosphere.
So what can governments do to reduce carbon emissions? There are two popular policies, a carbon tax and a cap and trade system. A carbon tax puts a direct price on greenhouse gas emissions, which means higher costs for certain goods, services, and means of production. This means individuals and organizations have an incentive to reduce pollution so that they can avoid paying the tax. The key to the success of a carbon tax is choosing the right price. Too low, individuals and industries are going to pay the tax and keep polluting. Too high, and a consumer's quality of life can be impacted negatively. A cap and trade system, on the other hand, sets a limit on the overall number of emissions that companies within an industry can pollute. Companies can, however, sell parts of their allowance to other companies. This allows organizations who cannot cut back on emissions as easily to increase their allowances, while overall emissions still decrease. With a cap and trade system, the allowances are meant to decrease over time, resulting in a consistent decrease in emissions.
Where have these policies been introduced and have they worked? Europe adopted a cap and trade policy called the EU ETS. This scheme is predicted to help cut European emissions by 43% by 2030. In 2013, the UK introduced a new carbon tax solely for the fossil fuel industry. The measure was introduced on top of existing EU ETS system, raising the price of carbon from £5 to £23 per tonne. So did this combined approach actually work? Yes. In the last 5 years, coal-powered electricity in the UK has moved from 40% of the total to around 2% in early 2017. Another example is in British Columbia, which currently has a carbon tax for all consumers. The tax was revenue neutral through cuts in other taxes, starting at $10 per tonne of carbon and gradually increasing to $30. Fuel consumption per person has dropped 17.4% as a result.
So now the question is, how does carbon pricing influence businesses and consumers? In countries where carbon pricing has been implemented, it has increased innovation and energy efficiency, making businesses more competitive in their markets. Consumers will also be influenced by carbon pricing because fossil fuels are the main source of energy for most industrial sectors, impacting the cost of everyday goods. However, as we shift our production away from fossil fuels and use renewable energy instead, cost will decrease again. For this policy option to be effective and equitable, the price on carbon must be strong and increasing regularly. Governments should adopt other environmental and financial incentives, like subsidies for clean energy, to make these policies more effective and to reduce the impact on consumers and businesses. To sum up, in order to prevent harmful environmental consequences, we need to reduce our carbon emissions and put a price on them. Almost all the products you buy require a certain amount of carbon, so next time you buy something, think about the carbon it took to get there and what policies has your government implemented to stop climate change.